So thank you for being here today. Special warm welcome to Walilah Elshi and Yuval Rachamim, our speakers. Thank you for being with us. And of course, Daniel, my indispensable helper, who's been with me here from the beginning. Thank you for being here too. So for those of you who are new to TalkMatters, I'm Jenny Nemko, the founder of TalkMatters, and we've been going for about 7 months now. And this last year, with the awful pandemic, it's been incredibly sad and it's been a very difficult year. But one positive thing has come out of it. I've been able to do something I wanted to do for a long while. I've been able to try to interest as many people as possible, people who are often skeptical in the cooperative initiatives that enable Israelis and Palestinians to meet and talk together, to be able to showcase the important work that's happening and that is essential alongside policy changes for a better future for the area. And that is what TalkMatters is all about, supporting people to talk and to understand each other's personal and national narratives a little bit more. Today in the UK, it's National Holocaust Day. And today is about bringing people together to remember and learn about the terrible happenings in the Holocaust. Also a time to look to the future. And this evening, we have the opportunity to hear about the Family Circle, a joint Israeli-Palestinian organization made up of more than 600 bereaved families, every member of which has lost a loved one in the conflict and has chosen a path of reconciliation, not revenge. Before I introduce you to our speakers, just a little housekeeping. The webinar is being recorded, and I think it makes us a bit more together atmosphere if we keep our cameras open and it'll feel like a bit more of an audience for our speakers. But if it doesn't suit you, just switch off your camera. Yuval and Walilah will speak for about half an hour, and then we'll have a question and answer session. If you click on the chat box at the bottom and write your name and question addressed to me, I'll relay them to Walilah and Yuval, and we aim to finish by 6:30, the latest. So now to our speakers. Yuval is the co-director of the Parents Circle Families Forum. He joined the Parents Circle in 2010 and has hosted many of the dialogue programs and meetings between Israelis and Palestinians. Walilah's regularly active in the Parents Circle, which she joined in 2016. She's a really busy person, I know, because I saw her speaking on a Zoom just a few nights ago. She lives in Bethlehem and is an accountant in her spare time. Thank you, Walilah and Yuval, for being with us, for offering to share your stories and how it brought you to the work that you do and how the Parents Circle operates. So now I'm going to be quiet, I'm going to mute myself, and it's over to you. Thank you.
Who do you want to start? Just let us know, Jenny, who do you want to start?
Oh, I thought you decided amongst yourselves before we started. Okay.
I know we have not.
I think you should start first.
Yuval, why don't you go ahead?
Yuval? You want me to, oh, right? Okay. So first, thank you, Jenny, for inviting us and for creating this space where we can share not just our personal stories, but the entire vision of our organization, that bereavement and pain can lead not just to hate and revenge, but also to reconciliation, which is the core value of what we're doing. So let me just introduce myself a little bit. I'm Yuval Rachamim, born in Tel Aviv, but wandered through the country over the years, and finally I'm living back in Tel Aviv. I have 3 kids, grown kids, of course, and my story begins as a young kid, family of my father and mother. They were not born in Israel. They were born. My father was born in Turkmenistan and my mother in Georgia. They came up here as kids, and then they got to know each other and they got married. And I was the third after two daughters. They settled down in the Sharon area, not far from pretty much in the center of Tel Aviv. We had a farm, a small farm, raising strawberries. And it was a pretty happy family as much as I can recall. I had a very solid and happy childhood. I was a good student. And I'm talking about 1967, when the tension between Israel and its neighbors began to rise again. In my education, the values were like, Israel is a small country surrounded by enemies, struggling to survive and seeking peace with its neighbors. Small country and not very strong, and we felt very threatened and menaced by the calls from the other Arab states to destroy Israel, and that we do not have the right to be here. But we maintained the feeling that we have all the right to be here, and we really wish to have peace with our neighbors. That was the education I got. But at the same time, the state was called to defend itself. And my father, he was 41 years old. He was part of the reserve. He was not a soldier, but he was called about a month before the war. Like most of men in Israel, most of the men were called to the reserve units. And in the cities and towns, we remained children and women to take care of the business of the families. My mother was pregnant at the time. I was hoping to get a brother because I couldn't support the fact that I only have sisters. But at the time, you could not tell what's inside. I was 8 years old. And then at the 5th of June, the morning the war broke. We were in school. We had the shells, the bombing. We were rushed to the shelters, and then we were sent home. I was at the third grade of elementary school, and we were sent home. And for several days, we stayed in the state of war. We were not informed what's going on. But after 6 days, Israel, the wars ended, and it was a big victory for Israel. It conquered the West Bank, Jerusalem, the entire city of Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, the Sinai Peninsula. So for Israel, it was like a huge victory after all this fear and stress. Suddenly, we were for the first time aware of military power and success, and the country was really flooded with joy, and which later transformed to hubris, I believe. But the joy was that we broke the siege over Israel and mourn over all the nations around us, the enemies. And we were waiting for Dad to come back, like most of the people that were drafted. But he was not coming back, and Mother started to go look for him in hospitals and in army base with no results. And only after a few days or weeks, I can't remember, I was coming home from school, which we started, and there was a car parked next to our home, which I was not familiar with. And then I got home. They sent me to the neighbors. They say, don't come home. I went to the neighbors. I had nothing to do there. I understood something wrong is going on, but didn't know what. And then I got home and I saw the home started to get crowded with family members and people I didn't know. And there was a lot of stress in there. People were crying. Nobody told me what's going on. Only later in the evening, my auntie took me aside and said that father was killed and he's not coming back. And that was the beginning of my new life. My youth, my childhood has ended at that point. I wasn't even aware of the situation. I wasn't even able to cry. Never in my life I experienced anything like that. Even nothing like that happened to my friends or anybody I knew. So I don't think I was even able to process what just took place, what's going to be the future, what's going to be about my family, about myself. 1 month later, my mother gave birth to my youngest sister, which was a great disappointment to me. I was hoping for a boy. But it's not just that. I think it was considered a disaster for us because there was nobody to take care of the farm. My mother was really crushed and couldn't take care of the 4 kids. One of them was just born. I was sent to a kibbutz the following month with a foster family for several years. And pretty much the years that came by then, I was pretty angry. I began to understand that the Arab killed my father in the war. I'll grow up and I'll revenge. I'll go to the army. Maybe I'm gonna be a pilot and be able to bomb them and kill as many as possible Arabs. This was like as I look at it from now to those thoughts of a kid that nobody really tried to help him understand what's going on, what was really the history of all that. All I could think about is revenge. And then in high school, I joined military academy. Again, I think that was part of both my wish to become a fighter and also the sentiment in Israel that really army was so glorious with its victory on the 6-day war, that everything that was related to the army really attracted me. Of course, the chance to be engaged in the conflict as an officer, a soldier. Then I joined the army. I spent 6 years in the army. Fortunately, I was not engaged in any military activity, although the wars continued. Didn't kill anybody. And not just that, because at the time I began to, bring back all those thoughts and think about really what good will revenge do me. And I saw the wars kept coming, the 73 war, and then the Lebanon war, and people would continue to die all over the place, Israel and the West Bank and other places. So my sentiment about that conflict began to change, but not completely, because I never took action. I just, I got married, I had my kids, I was concentrated in my career for many years. And only at the age of 50, when my kids started to go to their military service, and instead of taking roles of, really defending the country, they were positioned in the West Bank, in checkpoints, controlling the traffic, the life of Palestinians. And this was not my understanding of how they should serve their country. And I understood at that point that after almost 40 years since I lost my my father, I need to take action. The leaders do not do that. And as a civilian, I really wanted to help make a change. So I started to look, what can I do as an adult? I remember my first boy, Eden, who went to the army after 1.5 year of training of, really elite unit. He was positioned at a checkpoint. He told me that they were only letting people go if they have permits. And there was this kid that came every morning trying to go through to the market to sell some pigeons. And they couldn't let him pass because he didn't have a permit. So he sat by the soldiers all day. And in the evening, went back home. He was probably afraid to go home immediately. And it was not a violent story. There was no violence there, but it was enough to make me really shocked. If that's what my boy needs to do in his military service, it's not acceptable. It really was the trigger for me to start being active. And years after, when I told him that, his story over that weekend really changed my position and my mind. He was not able to even remember what he told me or what he was doing. They are so putting that behind them because there's nothing that can explain or justify what they're doing. And they're just trying to forget those young soldiers. So I was really trying to look, what can I do? And I joined, and after some research, I discovered about this organization that was already there. And I joined as a member. And I found people there, Palestinians and Israelis. For the first time, I was meeting Palestinians that went through the same story, same pain and transformation of understanding that revenge will not take them anywhere, will not ease their pain. But all they can do is to make sure, or trying to make sure, that other people will not have to go through the same process and the same pain. And together, we try to convince our communities, both in Palestine and Israel, that we know the pain. We know the sentiment of what happens to you when somebody close is hurt, either injured or dying because of the conflict. And we understand the process. We understand where you are thrown immediately to what kind of pain and anger and hate and fear and all those feelings that are completely legitimate. But the result, the possible path of revenge will not take you anywhere. The only way to process this pain and to make it something useful or something positive for your life is to really go through the path of forgiving and reconciliation. And for the past 10 years, I've been trying to work within my community, within the Israeli community, both as a member of this community of bereaved families in Israeli and Palestinian families, in roles that I was taking in civil society organizations. And recently I was elected to direct, together with my Palestinian partner, to jointly direct this organization, which I'm really honored and privileged to do, because there are hundreds of extraordinary people that were able, like me, to transform their loss into something constructive to help take all of us in this region from our long path of 100 years of conflict and death and destruction to a better future. So I guess you may want to ask some questions later on, but let's hear Walilah, my sister, which I encountered for the first time in one of the seminars that I was engaging. I was facilitating, and she went directly into my heart, and as I'm sure she will go into yours. So thank you for listening.
So thank you, Val. Thank you so much. And really, I don't know how to say it, but it's so hard every time when I heard your story. It's not the first time, but every time I heard it, it's really touched my heart, and it's really what tears in my eyes. I want to say good evening to everyone, and thank you to give us this chance to share with you our personal story and to talk to you about our organization. So my name is Leila Sheikh. I'm from Bethlehem. I live in a village called Batir. It's near Bethlehem. I was born and raised in Jordan. I was the seventh child for my family. My father he is original from Bethlehem, but he went before the war, 1967, to Amman to start his work as a teacher for the refugees there. But after that, the war was started and the Israeli government didn't allow him to come back here. So he stayed in Jordan, and me and all my brothers and sisters born there, and we were educated there. And our life was very normal. There's nothing was unique in it. The only thing that was unique that I have my twin brother, and we sometimes make a few problems to my father and to the neighbors. But we were loved that life, and everything was normal until I finished my study in accounting business in Jordan, and I met my husband in Jordan. So in 1999, I came to Bethlehem to get married. For every Palestinian who born outside Palestine, it's a dream come true to come back here and stay here. So the first year was amazing. Everything was unique. I just started to visit everywhere, and I was really very happy to be here. After 1 year, we have our first daughter. We named her Yara, and we were so happy to have our own family. But unfortunately, after 2 months, the second uprising was start, and that was a disaster for me because it was the first time I lived in this kind of circumstances, and I was hoped that this will be end so soon, but unfortunately, every day it's become much harder, and the situation become much more complicated. But for me, I wasn't care because I was said, okay, I will take care of my husband, my daughter, and this is all. But after this, the Israeli government take a decision that they didn't want to give me my Palestinian ID. So that meant that I couldn't go freely from place to place, and I couldn't visit my family in Jordan. But I was think it's okay. I will take care of my family until I could see or go back to visit my family in Jordan. After 1 year, we have our second child. He was a boy. We named him Qusay. We were much happier because our family become bigger, and we have our planning and our family and, this new life. But unfortunately, this happiness was in 11th of April 2002. 4 o'clock in the morning, my son, he became at that day 6 months old, and he woke up and he was in a very critical condition because that night the Israeli soldiers came to our village and they threw tear gas, and he smelled some of it and he became very sick. And that time, the medical treatment wasn't good enough for his case. So in the middle of the night or 4 o'clock in the morning, he was very sick. So we tried to take him to Bethlehem, but the Israeli soldiers stopped us and they said, it's a military zone, you can't enter. So the second chance was to take him to Hebron because it's the next city to Bethlehem. But again, the Israeli soldiers said that the main road is closed. You can't go. So the only chance was to take him through many villages. The road will be rough and long, but it was our only chance to take him to Hebron. Between two villages, we find another checkpoint for the Israeli soldiers. They stop us. They try to search the car. They start to ask my husband, my father-in-law about their identity. So my father-in-law went and talked to them because he was the only one who speaks Hebrew. And he told them that our son in a very critical condition and he should be as soon as possible inside the hospital, but they asked him to stay in the car until they finish what they want to do. Every minute was so hard for me to look to my son between my arms, and I feel hopeless. I couldn't do anything for him. So I was thinking to take a risk, and that risk was to go to talk with those soldiers, because if they find that I didn't have my Palestinian ID, they will maybe send me to jail or send me back to Jordan, and I will never see my children again. But at that time, I wasn't care about myself. The only thing that I was care about is my son and how could I help him. So I went to talk to them, and they start to laugh, and they ask me to stay in the car until they allow us to move. We stay inside the car more than 4 hours, and you could imagine how much that was so hard for me to feel hopeless, and you can't do anything for your son. After these 4 hours, they allow us to move. So when we arrived at the hospital, it was too late. And the doctors said to me, if he will stay alive after 48 hours, he will be handicapped. At that moment, I was really become very angry and very sad. And I felt that the hospital crashed upon my head. I didn't know what to do, start to cry like crazy. Then a few minutes later, they took him to the intensive unit care, and they didn't allow us to see him. 2:00 in the evening, the doctor came and he said to us he should leave the hospital because the Israeli soldiers will came and search the house, and they will ask you to leave because your son inside the intensive unit care, and you can't stay here because they're afraid sometimes the fighter came and hide inside the hospital. They said, we begged the doctor to stay, but he said you should leave because this will bring problem even for me. So I asked him to see my son, and he said, you have just 2 minutes to see him. Don't touch him, don't kiss him, don't do anything because his condition is very bad. So I just look at him, say a few words for him, and left. And my heart was really broken. How could I leave him alone inside the hospital and go back? But I couldn't do anything. This is the only thing that I could do. So we arrived at the house in the evening. Immediately, I went to the house of my family-in-law because they were the only one who have phone. At that time, we wasn't have cell phones like today. So I pick up the phone and start to talk to the doctor, and he started to explain for me his condition and how much it's so hard. So I start to understand that he want to tell me something, but I don't want to believe him. So I asked him to repeat his word again, but I didn't understand. So I asked my husband to come and talk to him, and I asked him to let the speaker on. So he returned back and he said the same words to my husband. Then I started shouting him, what do you mean by this? And then he said to me, I'm sorry, but your son died. At that moment, I felt really so angry, and I was felt his word like a bullet come from his mouth to my heart, smash it down for many pieces. I started to cry like a crazy, didn't know what to do. Few minutes later, the house was full of people, neighbors, relatives, friends. But for me, I wasn't care about any one of them. I just think about my son. And then I start to convince myself this is a dream, and I will wake up again, and I will go to the hospital and bring my son back, and he will be better than before. But unfortunately, that wasn't a dream, that was the truth. At the middle of the night, I was very tired, and I put my back to the wall, and I was slept maybe for 5 minutes. Then I have a dream that there's a white dove came and stand on my shoulder and say to me, "Mama, don't cry. I'm so happy." I woke up and I really start to cry. And then my grandmother came and she said, "If he asked you to stop crying, you should." I told her, "I can't do anything he asked me to do, but I can't stop crying. He's part of my soul. He's part of my heart." That was maybe the longest night I've ever had in my whole life. I didn't know how it was gone. In the evening, my father-in-law went with some people to bring him back to say goodbye for him. Until the moment that they bring him and put him between my arms, I was still thinking that they lie and he's still alive and he will be in a good health. So when I take the blanket off, because I was miss him so much, I wasn't far away from him since he was born. So since I take the blanket off, he was very blue. And as I always do when I hold him, I try to kiss him in his cheek and put my cheek in his cheek. But that moment was totally different, because for the first time I felt that I kiss a frozen rock. Immediately I hugged him so tight because I was thinking maybe some kind of miracle will happen and he will go back to life. But the only thing was happened that they take him away from me, and I didn't see him from that moment. Sorry. From that moment, our life became upside down. Everything was changed. Everything was. Sometimes I try to find words to explain, but sometimes I feel that I can't really find words to explain my feeling. I was felt of anger, felt of hatred to every Israeli, because for me, every Israeli was responsible about the death of my son, because I always think that the Israeli soldiers always said that when they try to kill any Palestinian or take him to jail or do anything, that he maybe threw stones or maybe he tried to snipe some Israeli person, but my son was just 6 months old. So what is the crime that he've done? So the only crime that he've done, that he's a Palestinian. That was stuck in my head for more than 16 years. At that moment, I wasn't think of take revenge, because I think revenge will never bring anything back. But at the same time, I was taking a decision that I didn't want to talk to any Israeli person. And after the death of our son, my husband started to convince me to have another child. But we always fight about this. And for more than 3 years, I was refused. Until one day, my doctor told me, "Why you didn't want to have another children?" I told him, "Why I will have them? If they didn't die when they are children, even when they grow up, they will maybe go to jail for the rest of their life, or they will be killed, because they will be and somehow part of this cycle of violence." So after this 16 years, I met one of my friends, and he was participant of one of the projects to the Parents Circle Family Forum. And he called me and he started to talk about the forum. And I told him, "Please stop. Are you crazy? I may be the last person that you should to talk to him about this." And he said, "No, because I know you. I talked to you about this." I tell him how. And he said, "I want to ask you a question. Why until now you didn't tell your other children about what happened to their brother?" I told him, "Because I didn't want to lose any one of them. I didn't want them to want to take revenge and I will lose them. I lost one of them, and that was much more than enough for me. And I tried to protect them all these years." And he said, And maybe this will be a good chance, not just to protect your children, maybe other families and other children. In the beginning, I wasn't really convinced. I said that he's crazy. And he called me maybe every 2 days, 3 days. And once he told me about the conference in Bethlehem, will bring both sides together and they will start to talk. And I said, okay, just to make him stop calling me. And then at that day, I was thinking to find an excuse, because really I wasn't think that I want to go there. And he called me and he said, I'm in the car waiting for you because I know that you tried to find excuse because you didn't want to go. And I say, oh my God, he will never go away until I really go with him. So we went there. In the beginning, they were just Palestinian. I went there and started to say hi and start to talk to them. 5 minutes later, the Israelis start to came. And when they entered that room, I start to feel that there was something in my chest start to ache me. And I was stand and I want to leave that room. Then my friend told me, you should stay and listen to them. And after that, decide what do you want to do. So I said, okay. So it was the first time I saw both sides, they start to hug each other and kiss each other like not just a friend. They become like family members. So I was really shocked and I want to know what's the thing that make them so close to each other like that and make them really friends or... So I sit there and start to hear them speaking, and it was really the first time I looked to them as a human, like me, as enemy. When I start to hear their stories, and I felt that we share the same pain, we share the same tears, and we lost our beloved ones, and that's the most hardest thing happened to anyone. So from that moment, I decided to participate in one of the project to know much more about the forum and to know about the Israeli. So I participate in one of the project called Burn Narrative Project. And one of the activity was to sit with Israeli women and start to talk about something happened during the conflict. So it was the first time I speak about my son and what happened to him. And it's like to open the wound again after all these years, bring all memories back. I couldn't complete the story and I start to cry. And I was shocked when one of the Israeli women came and she sat in front of me and she apologized and said, I'm sorry. And I was shocked and said, why are you sorry for? And she said, yeah, I didn't hurt you or didn't do anything for you, but I know the people who are responsible about the death of your son from my own people, and I'm a mother too. I could understand your pain. I could understand even the word that you couldn't say. And she came and hugged me. And I was really touched because it was the first time someone talked to me like that, even my family members. No one of them talked to me like this. She didn't know that time, but by her simple words that she changed my life forever. And she opened my heart, she opened my eyes to understand new things. And it's not just a simple thing, it's something really like, her word was like light comes from a dark, deep place. So from that moment, I decided to be a member, and not just a member. I started to be an active member, started to give lectures inside Israel, inside Palestine, and even around the world. And during this transformation, I started to find new things like, I wasn't think of revenge, but now I start to think of that I want to forgive them. It's a choice that I take. And not just I want to forgive them because of them, even because of me, because when you feel of hatred and anger, that was like something so heavy in your shoulder, didn't let you do a lot of things. And you, when forgive them, it's let your spirit and your heart feel much more maybe comfortable. And it's so easy to talk to people about peace and reconciliation and all these beautiful words, but the most important thing to feel it from inside. And what helped me to understand all these things when I start to meet the Israelis and start to understand the circumstances that they live and how they live, I take that decision of really forgiveness. And until now, we still complete with this transformation. And I want to thank God really for this amazing opportunity that he gives to me. And after I joined the forum, I remember that dream about my son when he came as a white dove. And at that time, I wasn't understand what it means. But after I joined the forum, I started to understand that it was like a symbol from God that he will be a sign for peace for me, not just his death will never go without any meaning. And I know sometimes God let the things or the bad things happen to us because he wants us to be in maybe in a good life, or better things will happen to us. So thank God that he gave me that chance. And thank you so much for letting me speak tonight. Thank you so much.
Jenny, you are muted.
Okay. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing that and for opening your hearts to us. And I appreciate how difficult it must be. And thank you. We're now going to take some questions, and I suggest that you write whatever you want to write into the chat box, and I will relay your questions either to both our speakers or to one or other, whatever you want. I would like to get going actually and start the questions by asking about the kind of work that you do in the parents circle right throughout the year. What are the things that you are aiming at? And I know for Yuval, it's you're in a new position as co-director. So what are you aiming at? What are you doing? And what are you aiming to do? Perhaps I could ask you that, Yuval. Thank you.
Right. What we know now is that with all that we went through, the members of the Parent Circle Families Forum are the lucky ones that have the chance to engage with each other. Most Israelis and Palestinians just don't know the other side. They have only information coming from the media and from the leadership, and it's very biased, of course, to each side's narrative. But we know the truth. We know that on the other side, there are people just like us that suffer from the same fear, anxiety, and distress that is coming from the ongoing conflict. We are privileged in Israel because we have a much better situation. We are the stronger player in this conflict. We economically, socially, militarily, we are really the powerful player. And we look at the Palestinians and we know that our state, the state of Israel, is running the occupation over there, which turns the life of Palestinians really hell. So what we're trying to do in the organization, in the forum, is to educate our societies that first we must know the other much better, that the pain on both sides is the same. It's not that the other is the devil and we are the angels. Both sides are victims and both sides are enemies. And we must speak in order to break this wall. And there are chances of, better life for everybody on both sides. So that's the vision. But in practice, what we're doing is working in several domains. First is the community of bereaved families on both sides to create opportunities for meeting and sharing and discussing things together. It's really hard to do right now because of COVID and because the borders are closed. Palestinians are not allowed to enter Israel for these kind of activities. Some workers have the permit to come into Israel, but most Palestinians, anyone who does not have a working permit cannot come to Israel. So meetings, physical meetings between Israelis and Palestinians are impossible for a year now. So we do it on Zoom. We do those meetings on Zoom, and we discovered that although it's not the same, it's much better than just sit and wait for the situation to change. So we are building this community over almost 30 years now. The external activities that we do is education. We do dialogue meetings just like this one in Hebrew in Israeli schools and adult groups. We do several hundred meetings a year, as much as we can afford and are invited to do. We're doing youth seminars, continuation programs to educate the youth better on the conflict. You know that the education system in Israel do not deal with the conflict so much. It's considered a political issue. So many Israelis, all of Israelis that were born after the 6-Day War, after 67, they just don't know where the border, which is called the Green Line, and the West Bank, what separates the West Bank from Israel. It was erased from the maps. So people are just not aware of the history of this conflict and even of the current situation of the conflict. So education is one major issue. We're doing some seminars where we bring together Palestinians and Israelis for a long seminar of getting to know the narratives of each side, which helps them understand the role of the role of the narrative in maintaining the conflict, and how by knowing the narrative of the other, and you don't have to agree to that narrative, but accepting the fact that there are two narratives that can coexist can help us build bridge to the other side and get to know the other side and maybe end the conflict. We try to do a lot of more public activities through the media, through art, through movies, video, social networks, to get the message across to as many people as possible. I'm telling you that in Israel it's hard. People are no longer so occupied with the conflict. The conflict is not directly related, or at least not conceived as directly related to their lives. People are busy with the disease, with the internal politics, with the economy. And our goal is to always keep it on the news, on the attention, so that people will understand that while they are staying safe in their homes, people in Gaza and in the West Bank are suffering, and that it's within our responsibility as Israelis to end the conflict, not just for them, to help them live normal lives with freedom, independence, but for us as the people who are responsible for that, in order to come back to our borders and start building a just society in Israel. So this is entirely an Israeli interest to end this conflict as much as it is a Palestinian interest. So that's the public aspect.
Thank you.
I know all that costs a lot of money because the media costs money, and we are continuing to develop our programs. Within those times, we moved many of our programs online. Many of the meetings that were done physically are now brought to the public online, and it's quite successful. I can say it overcomes many of the limitations that are imposed on us on both sides.
Thank you, Yuval. And now we have a question for Valiyllah, and it's about how your involvement in the parent circle is received in your own community.
Sorry about that, I didn't hear you.
Want me to say the question again?
Yes, please.
Thank you. It is about how your involvement in the parent circle is received in your own community.
Okay. So in my family here in Palestine, my husband, my family-in-law, they encourage me a lot because they saw how much I changed for better. Because before that, I was always angry and I always sad, and most of the time didn't want to leave the house. I just want to stay with.
Have we just lost Lila?
No, no, I'm here. I'm back again. So I said, my husband, my family-in-law, they were encouraging me a lot because they saw the transformation that happened to me, and they always encouraged me to do it because they saw how much really I changed. But my family in Jordan, they still have that opinion that they're still our enemies. You shouldn't be with them. And there's a story happened before coronavirus when I tried to went to Italy with the forum to be there to spread the message of peace and reconciliation there. So before I went to Italy, I went to Jordan to see my family for 2 days. So my father, I have like argument with my father, and he said to me, "You shouldn't go with them, and they're still our enemies." I told him, "Look, I want to ask you a question. I stay inside Bethlehem for more than 11 years without, or I couldn't came and see you. Do you know what happened to me during this 11 years?" He said, "No." I told him, "You know that I lost my son. Do you know the story?" And he said, "No." I told him, "How could you judge me? How could you ask me to do something or not to do? This is my life, and I'm the only one who decide what's the best for me." And he was shocked because it's the first time I speak to him like this. And I was shocked because I have this power that, and to convince him, and that power comes from the deep place from my heart, because from we said that from pain the power came sometimes. Then when my father saw how much I speak about this, and I'm really convinced about it, and he said, "It's okay if you are really believe about what you are doing, so do it, and I will support you, but I still have my opinion. I respect it." So you find always the two opinions, that some encourage you and some said, "No, you shouldn't be with them," you know.
Thank you, Lila. There's another question for you. Sharon asks, how do you relate to Israeli soldiers now?
Oh, this is a good question. And I really love to tell stories. When they asked me in the forum that I want to go to talk with girls, and those girls at the age of 17 and 18, and they will go to the army. The whole night I wasn't sleep because I was thinking, what should I talk to them? How could I speak to them? And you know, the soldier for me, what it meant. And I say, okay, I will go and say my story and will answer their question and then leave. But when I went there and I saw them, they were at the same age of my oldest daughter. And I said, okay, I will speak to them as I speak to my daughter. So in the beginning, I said my story with my partner, and we speak about the forum, and they start to ask the questions. And then one of them, she asked me, "So what do you want from us to do?" And I said, okay, this is the time. I told her, look, I feel that all of you as my daughters, because you are at the same age of her, and I will never told her what to do. I could give her advice, but it's her opinion and it's your opinion what you should do. It's your choice, not mine. But the only thing maybe I could tell you that if you choose to be in checkpoints or to be a soldier, the only thing that I want to ask you to do to be human and act with the person who in front of you as a human. Don't look at his religion or his background or is his Arab, or he may be a foreign, he is Muslim or Christian or whatever. Just deal with him like any other human. And one of the things that really helped me when I joined the forum, that I stopped looking to myself as a victim, and I start to look to myself as a survivor. Because when I start to understand, when you send a soldier at the age of 18 and 17 or until 19 and give him a gun during that crazy situation, so he could do anything. I can't blame them. I could maybe blame the government, blame the law. And I start to look to them. They are the victims of their law. They are the victims of their government, really.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question from a it asks, are you involved in helping the Palestinians get the COVID vaccine? What exactly is the situation? Maybe Yuval, you could take that one, please.
We can do very little because we had a letter 2 weeks ago. We wrote a letter to our prime minister, to Netanyahu, asking him to use his very good relations with the pharmaceutical companies to help advance the supply of vaccine to the Palestinians in the West Bank, in Gaza Strip, because we are responsible for them. Although they are under the Palestinian Authority, still Israel has much of the responsibility for their well-being and for their health, of course. Many people in Israel think that it's not a problem, that the Palestinians will take care of themselves. But we know very much that the Palestinians do not have a lot of resources, their connections in the world, and the power and the influence is not as good as we have in Israel. I got my second shot this morning, and I will be pretty much safe in a few weeks. Whereas the Palestinians that do the same work with us at the office in Beit Jala, we have 2 offices, one in Israel, one in Palestine. They have no idea when are they going to get vaccinated. I mean, they're getting few hundreds or thousands of vaccinations from all kind of origins, but nothing is secured, nothing is completely. Our life is with a lot of contact with Palestinians, and everything that comes to Palestine has to go through Israel. And Israel, I know that there were discussions whether to help them or not, in the public, in the press, and also in the government. But still, I know that Israel is the first state in the world that's going to be really very highly vaccinated, whereas the Palestinians probably are going to be one of the last. I really hope that the government of Israel will take some level of responsibility and help the Palestinians get vaccinated sooner.
Thank you. Thank you. And there's another one here for you, Yuval, from Anne. Does the forum find the Israeli students or Palestinian students more receptive to their initiative? Which group of students? Is it true that there's one group of students, Israelis or Palestinians, that are more receptive to your initiatives?
Laila, do you want to answer?
So sorry?
I was asking whether Laila can speak.
Right. Okay, Lilo.
Sorry, I didn't hear because my daughter was came and she was speaking to me.
You want me to say the question again?
Yes, please.
Okay, and it's, does the forum find the Israeli students or the Palestinian students more receptive to your initiatives?
We have a lot of freedom in Israel to speak to students in high school. I think this still, although Minister of Education has a lot of make many attempts to stop us from even getting to schools, we still have some independent schoolmasters that help us going into school. So at least we have the chance to speak to high school students, and for some of them, it's the first time they ever meet a Palestinian. So we know that many of them, after this session, after this dialogue meeting, they start to explore what can they do to change to explore more. I remember one of the sessions I had a few years ago. After the dialogue meeting, after the session like this, which was in a classroom, it's like the 12th grade, the year before they joined the army. One girl came to me after the lecture, and she asked me about my transformation. She reminded me that I was talking about the transformation that I went through as a child, as an adult, as a young man, and she asked me to explain to her exactly how did this transformation occur. And I was not giving her any answer, but I was asking her why she's asking that. And she said, a friend of mine was hurt in a terrorist attack in Netanya, and I decided that I would join the army, to the most violent unit of the border guards. It's called Magav in Israel, where they also recruit girls as combatants, because she thought that was the best way for her to engage in physical contact with Palestinians and to really take revenge of the friend that she lost. And she said to me, by listening to your lecture of both of you, I decided to change my request and not to join this unit. And that really gave me some kind of understanding of how deep our sharing is going when young people hear the stories of Palestinians and Israelis, the human stories. So I guess everybody has it's very personal. And Laila, would you have, I know that in the West Bank you do not go to schools, but you do meet students, right?
Yes. We are not allowed to go to schools inside West Bank because the government didn't give us chance. But we still do it. Like we ask them to sometimes to go to the houses or to meet them in other places and start to talk to them. And we sometimes are shocked that they have strong, really questions. But we try to answer all their questions, but we always told them we are not experts, but we are talking from our heart. We are the people who suffer a lot, and we are the people who think that we have this responsibility to change the future for them. They deserve to have a new future, and it's our mission now to start to put these seeds in the ground, and they are the people who will like continue our message, because to lose your beloved ones, it's something, the hardest thing could happen to anyone, and nothing will bring anything back. And if some people think that revenge will give them feeling of comfortable, I don't think so, because when they do that, they will find lately that this is the worst thing happened to them. And sometimes when we, as I said, when we were felt of hatred and anger, we didn't realize a lot of things around us. Like uh, as a Muslim, and we have Quran, there is a scripture in Quran said, you can't judge the whole people because of mistake of one person. So I was thinking, oh my God, that was in front of me. I couldn't realize that. Sometimes the thing become in front of us, but because the anger close our heart and our mind to understand other things. So it's our mission to let them understand. And because of that, we make this kind of dialogue meeting, or even the Pearl Nerve project. And we make summer camps before coronavirus and let them start to sit. And sometimes they couldn't like speak to each other because most of them, they didn't understand the other language. but just when you bring both of the sides and give them a ball and they start playing with each other, even if they didn't have a language to communicate with each other. And this is so amazing that the children have this ability to understand sometimes, I think much more maybe than the adults. And this is what we try to do to talk to this new generation, because they will continue our message. Thank you.
Can I ask you about the summer camps? Is it that the Palestinian children go and into Israel for the camp, or are the camps separate? How does it work?
Can you repeat
I
that?
think maybe Yuval could. She asked about the summer camp, how it's happened.
Oh, we try to do it every year for 5 days. Bring about 30, between 20 to 30 Israelis and 20 to 30 Palestinian kids to a summer camp. It's taking place in Israel most of the time. We hire kind of a resort, and we have facilitators that are trained, and we have translators. But the thing is that, you see that the first day when they came by bus, they come to the resort. They feel a lot of, there's a lot of anxiety and fear from each other. The groups are separated. They hang with their own people. And by the 5th day, when they need to go back home, it's like hugging and kissing, and they cry. They don't want to leave each other. They exchange phone numbers, and they set up their own WhatsApp groups, and they continue to communicate over time. And after year after year, and then they become facilitators for the next generation. So it's really amazing to see how this transforms those kids, and how they allow them to build confidence that things can change. I'm sure that they are the great ambassadors after that. Unfortunately, this year we could not bring them together. It was very painful because some of the participants of last year wanted to come this year as well. We were not able to facilitate this year. Really hopeful that this year, we will be able to do the summer camp again.
Thank you.
It's an extraordinary experience.
Thank you. We have time for 2 last questions, but before I give those questions, I must tell you how many comments have been made thanking you. Really deep gratitude to you both for sharing your stories. And the 2 questions are about the future in a way. Well, for us who live outside Israel, what we can do to support your work, and also about how much media publicity you are getting, newspapers, television, how much your message is being spread within Israel and Palestine. So perhaps we could start with the Israel-Palestine one, and then for us, what we can do. Thank you.
We plan to become much more public because of all the restrictions we are having now. This year, the plan for next year is really make an extensive use of media. Unfortunately, the press in Israel is not really keen to show peace talks and people sitting and talking peacefully. That throwing rocks and setting fire is much more sells much more airtime on TV and much more attracting for the news. So we're trying to create events. For example, this day today, I don't know if any of you Jewish people, that there's a Tu B'Shvat. It's the holiday for the trees. It's a Jewish traditional holiday for the trees and for nature. And we celebrate this holiday by planting trees every year. So this year we decided to plant olive trees on both sides in memory of 10 Israelis and 10 Palestinians who died in the conflict. And we really wanted to use this as some kind of public event because we could not bring the people to actually participate in planting because of restrictions, but we did do a short clip of video and press release for the media to share this event, because this is something that we can do even with the condition and with the separation and everything. We try to do activities like that will show that there are human beings on both sides. That it's hard for Palestinians to accept Israelis, it's hard for Israelis to accept Palestinians, and we struggle with that because often people just don't want to hear, because after so many years of conflict, Israeli side, people are used to that. I know that in the UK you haven't had any war for a long time. In Israel, it's a daily issue. It's something that happens all day. So people are just conditioned to live in a conflict situation. And when they hear about somebody who tries to make peace, it sounds like, something really strange. This is a situation, we know how to live with that. And we try to struggle with that and really create attention, draw attention to things that we do to the other side, bring the voice of the other side through our channels to our side. My community, the Israeli community, do not know the Palestinians. And every time that we bring a Palestinian voice to Israel, it's shocking for them because they believe they are, savages, animals. Only terrorists come from that other side. And I guess for many Palestinians, they have the same sentiment about Israelis, that Israelis are just soldiers or settlers because they don't know the common Israeli. So we must be very, very active in the public side, in the educational side, and really hope this year we'll be free to do more of that.
Thank you. And for us here in all the country, in America, Switzerland, UK, how can we help?
Spread the word, invite us to more talking opportunities like that. We are glad to do that in every occasion. In your communities, with Zoom, there are no more borders. We can do that everywhere with large audience, small audience. You can go to our website, see what engagement opportunities we have, contribution, registering to our newsletter. And really, if you have any political influence over your leaders, let them know that there are no good and bad in this conflict we have. We are two nations who are lost with poor leadership that do not know how to sit down and solve this conflict. So if we need anything from foreign governments, is to really force the Palestinian and Israeli leadership to just sit together and once and for all end this conflict.
Thank you. Thank you for a really inspiring, touching experience of sharing everything with us this evening, and for answering our questions so directly as well. I want to mention Colum McCann. He wrote a book called A Paragon that weaves together the stories of two great friends of the parent circle. I no doubt Walilah and Yuval will know a lot about this. But it's a book that I highly recommend because McCann says something in this book that really weighs up the way I feel when I listen to what Walilah and Yuval have to say. And he talks about being thrown off balance. But he says that that's a good thing, that at one level, we must surrender to the confusion and the complexity of the political situation, but that's not to say that we mustn't know each other. And he says, if we don't know each other above the ground, we'll know each other below the ground. I think there's a message here for us all that we do have a responsibility to talk about what we heard tonight, a responsibility not to be silent, even if we don't agree with everything, a responsibility to encourage more Israelis and Palestinians to talk and to know each other. And when you start to talk, you aren't an enemy anymore. So thank you, Walilah, Yuval. We really appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you for the strength you give us today to spread your powerful message. Thank you to Daniel for once again being a star with all the technical stuff. Thank you to you all for being with us. Please make sure to tell your friends and post on your social media platforms that you heard Yuval and Lila today. Please support the Parent Circle and TalkMatters. Join our mailing lists and help us to reach out to many more people. Thank you all so much. Enjoy your evening, and most of all, keep safe, keep well. Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lila. Thank you, Yuval.
Great audience
Daniel.
tonight.
Thank
Lots of.
you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Daniel's going to close.